But even as integration became an accomplished fact in North Carolina, there were many signs that the schools would remain an arena of considerable ambivalence and dispute. In 1972, white North Carolinians launched the U.S. Senate career of Jesse Helms. He would remain an outspoken opponent of civil rights during his 30 years in Washington. In the early 1970s, Helms criticized what he termed forced busing.
Now we've got discrimination in reverse now. The idea of children being assigned to schools on the other side of town just to achieve some sort of, quote, racial balance, end of quote, that satisfies the whim and caprice of some bureaucrat or judge or both. Our schools are going to pot. Now, I think that some of my dear colleagues on the floor of the Senate are mistaking the mood of the people, and this may, well, affect their futures. I hope it will, because if they can't change their mind in the face of obvious fact, where they have been proved wrong, then they need to be eliminated from the Senate. If I'm wrong, well, let them eliminate me, but I don't think I'm wrong.
Since the mid-1970s, an increasingly conservative Supreme Court has generally turned its back on the cause of integrated public education. In 1974, the court isolated white suburbs from integration obligations, and in 1975 turned away impoverished districts seeking equalized school funding. During the 1980s and 90s, the federal judiciary grew even less sympathetic to civil rights concerns. The Supreme Court under Chief Justice William Rehnquist began lifting the court orders that had compelled local officials to continue pursuing racial balance in the public schools. In the late 1990s, white parents brought suit against Charlotte school officials, forcing them to abandon busing plans dating from the 1969 Swan case. Integration levels in local schools decreased accordingly. In North Carolina today, analysts warn of a perfect storm that threatens to push segregation in the state schools to pre-Brown levels. Three factors continue to stimulate school resegregation: the failure of school finance equalization, the end of court-ordered desegregation, and newly introduced high-stakes testing. 50 years after Brown, we recognize that the race problem in America is larger than the schools. North Carolina's residential neighborhoods remain segregated. Without busing, school officials lack effective methods to sustain integration levels. Ultimately, social justice means not simply civil rights, but economic rights as well. Longtime Robeson County community organizer Gerald Sider laments the civil rights movement's failure to encompass meaningful employment protections and to prevent the exploitation of vulnerable populations.
Civil rights has to be understood as a fraud and a heartbreak at the beginning, and a fraud and a heartbreak at the end. The clearest indication of the heartbreak is the utter displacement of African Americans from the labor force, because a black person with civil rights is a contradiction in terms. You hire a Mexican in these turkey plants, you hire a Mexican in the hog packing plants, because precisely what you want is someone who has no civil rights. I mean, it's not the fact they want Mexicans, they don't want people who speak Spanish, they want people without civil rights. And when the blacks did all this struggle to get their civil rights, you get rid of them, and you bring in people that don't have them.
Today, as our schools continue to carry on the business of integrated public education, they must contest with increasing stresses and strains. Just as in 1954, the public schools continue to reflect and even to reinforce the structural inequalities that plague American society. Despite such realities, or perhaps because of them, We continue to invest our public schools with our dreams. William Culp Jr., a white parent and teacher from Charlotte, remains a believer in the merits of integrated public education.
Kids that, particularly in an urban community, who don't go to integrated schools simply miss out on a lot of what's real about the urban environment. And they're not very well prepared to deal with the real world when they become adults. And so I felt like that this was an opportunity for my children, at least, to have a better understanding of the world and of people, and to therefore be more successful in life. I never really thought of it as a social experiment. I thought of it as something that's time was overdue, not just due. And so for at least my family, it was something that was a commitment that we made, that we wanted to do something during our life to make the world a better place to live and to help people learn to understand and get along better. And so integration in the schools was simply one part of that.
Let me tell you another one.